Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today we're diving deep into Andy Grove's High Output Management. It's a book that's kind of, achieved almost legendary status in the business world.
It's true.
Has it lived up to the hype?
I think so.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it's considered, a must-read for anybody in a management position, but there's so much wisdom in it that can benefit anyone who wants to just improve their own personal productivity as well.
Okay, so before we get into the specifics, can you just give us a high-level overview of the book's main themes? What's the big picture takeaway here?
Yeah, so at its core, high output management is all about applying the principles of manufacturing production to the world of management and personal effectiveness. And Grove really argues that, whether you're running a factory, leading a team, or just managing your own daily tasks, the same fundamental principles apply.
So it's not just about giving orders or delegating tasks. It's about approaching management as a systematic process. Kind of.
Exactly. And it's about understanding how work flows through an organization or even through your own to-do list and identifying bottlenecks and optimizing each step of the way to maximize output. And one of the key tools that he introduces in the book is this concept of managerial leverage.
Ooh, managerial leverage.
Yeah.
That sounds interesting. What does that mean?
Yeah, so essentially it's about, understanding which activities have the biggest impact on your overall output and then really focusing your time and energy on those things. And there's this one great quote from the book: "The output of a manager is the output of the organizational units under his supervision or influence."
Okay, so it's not just about working hard, it's about working smart. It's about identifying those high leverage activities that will kind of have this ripple effect across the entire team or organization.
Precisely. And he gives a framework for identifying those high leverage activities throughout the book, whether it's, conducting effective performance reviews or running productive meetings or even, just mastering the art of delegation.
Okay, so, all right, I'm ready to dive in. Where do we start?
So right out of the gate, Grove introduces this analogy of a breakfast factory.
Oh, the breakfast factory. I remember this.
Yeah, have you heard of it?
I have.
Yeah. So he uses the seemingly simple act of making breakfast to illustrate the basic principles of production.
Ah.
Breaking it down into processes like processing, like cooking or assembly, and then testing, the all-important taste test.
Yeah, I remember that analogy.
Yeah.
It's such a clever way to make these concepts, relatable.
Right?
Yeah. It shows that even, the most, mundane task involves a production process in a way.
Totally. And he goes on to demonstrate how these same principles apply to more complex processes like college recruitment, software development, even the criminal justice system.
Yeah, it's like he's saying no matter what field you're in, if you can understand these fundamental processes and optimize them, you can really increase your output.
That's the big takeaway. And he says that one of the first steps in optimizing any process is identifying what he calls the limiting step.
Okay.
Think of it like a bottleneck in the process.
Yeah.
So, back to the breakfast factory. If your egg boiler breaks down, the entire production process is going to grind to a halt.
Right. Because you can't move on to the next step without that crucial element. It's like when I'm working on a design project and I'm waiting on feedback from a client, and it's like everything is just stalled until I have that input.
Exactly. So Grove argues that by identifying these limiting steps in any process, whether it's, a faulty piece of equipment or, in your case, a delayed approval, you can really focus on improving their efficiency. And that's ultimately what boosts the output of the entire system.
So it's not about working harder. It's about working smarter.
Yes.
It's about finding those choke points and figuring out how to streamline them.
Right. And that's where the concept of managerial leverage comes back in. It's about focusing your energy on the activities that will have the biggest impact on those limiting steps, rather than spreading yourself thin on low-impact tasks.
Okay, so how do we identify those high-leverage activities? What examples does he give in the book?
One really powerful example he highlights is the performance review.
Okay.
He argues that spending a few hours on a thoughtful and constructive performance review can have a positive impact on an employee's work for weeks or even months to come.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's like investing a little bit of time up front in giving, good feedback can save you a lot of headaches down the road.
Exactly. And then, conversely, a poorly conducted review can have the opposite effect, demotivating employees and hindering their progress.
Yeah, totally. It really highlights the importance of seeing feedback as a high-leverage activity and not just a box to check.
Right. And speaking of high leverage activities, Grove also emphasizes the importance of meetings. But he makes a crucial distinction between what he calls process-oriented meetings, like regularly scheduled team check-ins, and mission-oriented meetings, which are more ad hoc sessions focused on, specific problems or decisions that need to be made.
So he's not saying all meetings are bad, just that we need to be strategic about them.
Right. And then within those meetings, he really emphasizes the importance of one-on-one meetings with your direct reports.
Okay.
He actually calls them the principal way to maintain a healthy and productive working relationship.
Okay, so one-on-ones are key.
Yeah.
What makes them so valuable in his view?
Well, he argues that they allow for a level of tailored communication and feedback that you just can't achieve in, group settings.
Right.
It creates the space for, open dialogue and problem solving and, most importantly, for understanding the task-relevant maturity of your team members.
Task-relevant maturity. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a key concept in the book. Can you remind us what that means?
Of course. So task-relevant maturity is all about assessing an individual's experience and skill level with a particular task. And it's not necessarily their overall experience level. Right. So you can have somebody who's very, senior in the company.
Right.
But if they're taking on a brand new responsibility, their task relevant maturity for that specific task would be lower.
So it's not about their job title. It's about their experience with the specific task at hand. So how does this concept of task relevant maturity inform the way we manage people?
That's a great question, and it leads us right into the next part of his framework.
Okay.
He argues that the ideal management style actually shifts depending on a subordinate's task-relevant maturity.
Okay, so the way you manage someone would depend on their, level of experience with that particular task.
Exactly. So if someone's task-relevant maturity is low, you might need to be more directive, providing clear instructions and close supervision. And as their maturity increases, you can gradually shift to a more collaborative style. Focusing on coaching and guidance rather than, kind of top-down instructions.
So it's not about finding one right way to manage. It's about adapting your approach to the individual and the situation.
Exactly. Meeting people where they are and providing the right level of support to help them succeed.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've covered the breakfast factory analogy. We've talked about the concept of managerial leverage, the importance of performance reviews and one-on-ones, and this idea of task-relevant maturity. What's next on, Grove's roadmap for high-output management?
Well, from managing individuals and teams, he then zooms out to the complexities of managing larger organizations.
Okay.
And he introduces this concept of hybrid organizations.
Ooh, hybrid organizations. That sounds like a whole other can of worms.
It is.
I'm eager to hear more about that. Ready when you are.
Let's dive in. So imagine our breakfast factory, going national, expanding into a franchise. Suddenly we're not just managing one kitchen, we're managing hundreds.
Whoa, yeah. Talk about scaling up.
Exactly. And so Grove uses this scenario to explore what he calls hybrid organizations, ones that try to balance this centralized control with the need for decentralized decision-making at the local level.
Oh, right.
Right. It's about finding that sweet spot between consistency and responsiveness.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
You want all your breakfast franchises to uphold certain standards, benefit from those economies of scale, but you also want to give them some flexibility to cater to, local tastes, right?
Spot on. And he says that, finding that optimal blend of centralized and decentralized structures is a constant challenge for most companies. In fact, he dedicates a whole section of the book to unpacking the complexities of hybrid organizations.
Yeah, it's almost like walking a tightrope between too much control and too much chaos.
It is. And he gives this to illustrate the dangers of leaning too far towards centralization. He shares this hilarious anecdote about the Hungarian central planning organizations, struggles with managing the supply and demand of photographic film.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. They were so focused on central control that they couldn't keep up with, the seasonal fluctuations in demand.
Yeah.
Resulting in, shortages of certain film types at certain times of year.
Precisely. It's a perfect example of how overly centralized systems can become unresponsive to the real-world needs of, even something as simple as photographers needing different film types in different seasons.
Yeah. Okay, I can see how, too much centralization can be a problem. But what about the other side of that coin? What are the pitfalls of being too decentralized?
Yeah, well, if you swing too far in that direction, then you end up with inconsistencies and duplicated efforts and a lack of overall strategic direction.
Yeah.
Imagine if every breakfast franchise started using different ingredients and different recipes and different branding. It would be a mess.
Right. You lose the power of the brand and the efficiency that comes with, standardized processes.
Exactly.
So it's all about finding that balance. But how do you actually do that in practice? It seems really hard.
Well, that's the million-dollar question, right? And he offers several tools and strategies to navigate this challenge. And one of the most intriguing ones is this concept of dual reporting.
Ooh, dual reporting.
Yeah.
Now, that's a concept I would love to unpack a bit further because I, heard about that.
Okay, sure.
And I've seen it in action in different organizations.
So it's essentially a way to kind of bridge the gap between different functions and departments within a hybrid organization.
Okay.
So essentially individuals might report to multiple managers, each representing, a different area of expertise or responsibility.
So instead of having like one boss, you might have like a functional manager and a project manager.
Exactly.
Okay.
And he actually gives a real world example of how this might play out in an advertising department.
Oh, okay.
You could have divisional marketing managers who are responsible for, promoting specific product lines, but they also report to, a corporate merchandising manager who ensures like brand consistency and oversees, all the advertising efforts across the company.
So it's a way to kind of like maintain alignment and coordination across different parts of the organization without sacrificing like the expertise and the responsiveness of the individual teams.
Exactly. It's a way to leverage the strengths of both centralized and decentralized structures.
Okay. I can see how dual reporting could be like really beneficial in some cases, but I can also see how it could create like confusion for the employees who are reporting to multiple managers.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how do you prevent them from getting, like, conflicting instructions or feeling, like, pulled in different directions?
It's a valid concern. And, the success of dual reporting really hinges on, like, clear communication and, well-defined roles and responsibilities and a strong culture of collaboration, like, amongst the managers.
But it's not like a silver bullet. It requires a lot of, like, careful planning and execution.
Exactly. It's a tool that can be incredibly powerful when used effectively, or it can also create a lot of headaches if it's not implemented thoughtfully.
I can imagine it can be tricky to navigate that kind of reporting structure, especially for someone who's used to, like, having a very clear chain of command.
It takes some getting used to.
Yeah.
But he argues that, the potential benefits in terms of organizational agility and responsiveness are worth the effort.
Okay, so we've, kind of explored the challenges of managing larger organizations.
Yeah.
And, this concept of, like, hybrid structures.
Yeah.
Where does Grove take us next in his, like, quest for high output?
So having laid this groundwork for understanding, organizational structures, he then shifts his focus to the individual players within those systems.
Okay.
And he dives deep into the topic of motivation.
Yes, motivation.
Yeah.
A topic that's near and dear to the heart of, I think, every manager. Because you can have the best, like, systems and processes in the world, but if your team isn't motivated, you're not going to get very far.
Right. And to understand motivation, he turns to, one of the most influential psychological frameworks, Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Oh, Maslow's hierarchy.
Yeah.
The classic pyramid of human needs from the, like, basic physiological needs at the bottom to the higher level needs, like self-actualization at the top. Yeah, I remember studying that in psychology class.
Exactly. And Grove argues that this framework provides a really powerful lens for understanding what drives human behavior, not just in our personal lives, but also in the workplace.
So he's saying that to motivate people effectively, we need to kind of understand where they are on that hierarchy of needs.
Exactly. What motivates someone who's struggling to meet their basic needs for food and shelter is going to be very different from what motivates someone who's, seeking self-fulfillment and creative expression.
Yeah, totally. It's like that saying, you can't teach a hungry man to fish, right?
Yeah.
If someone's like, basic needs aren't being met, it's going to be really hard to motivate them with, like, higher level aspirations.
Yeah. Precisely. And he emphasizes that as managers, we need to be attuned to the different needs and motivators of our team members. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah. So it's about recognizing that everyone is kind of on their own unique journey up that pyramid of needs. And our job as managers is to, like, understand where they are on that journey and provide the support and the resources they need to keep moving forward.
Well said. And along with understanding those, kind of fundamental needs, Grove also emphasizes the importance of providing regular, task-relevant feedback as a key driver of motivation and performance.
Oh.
In fact, he dedicates a whole chapter to the art and science of performance reviews.
Oh, the performance review,
Yeah.
a topic that often elicits, groans from both managers and employees.
Yeah.
But Grove seems to see it as like a really critical tool for growth and development.
He does. He argues that performance reviews, when done well, can be incredibly powerful for both, assessing performance and, more importantly, driving improvement. And he actually breaks down the process into two distinct challenges.
Hmm.
One is accurately assessing performance.
Uh-huh.
And the second is delivering that assessment in a way that, motivates and inspires.
Right. It's not just about giving people a grade. It's about helping them see their, strengths and weaknesses clearly,
Mm-hmm.
and then giving them, guidance on how to improve.
Exactly. And he stresses the importance of being, honest and direct in your feedback, but also empathetic and supportive. And he shares a personal anecdote about a time when he had to give a critical review to this high-performing manager who, on paper, was doing everything right.
Uh-huh.
But, there were these signs that something wasn't quite right,
Yeah.
high turnover on his team, kind of grumbling amongst his reports, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what he calls the potential trap, right?
Yeah.
It's it's so easy to get blinded by good results
Yeah.
and overlook those less tangible aspects of performance.
Right.
Like team morale or leadership style.
Yeah, that's the danger. And Grove realized, kind of, a bit too late in this case, that he had been so focused on this manager's, output, the numbers he was delivering, that he hadn't paid enough attention to the, internal dynamics of the team.
It's a reminder that the numbers don't always tell the whole story, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes the best feedback comes from observing those more subtle cues,
Yeah,
the things that don't show up on a spreadsheet.
that's such a crucial point. And he emphasizes that we need to be attuned to those signals,
Yeah.
not just focusing on the bottom line, but looking at the process, the how, not just the what.
Yeah, I love that. It's he's saying that good management is as much art as it is science.
Mm,
It's about intuition and observation, not just data and metrics.
exactly. And this brings us to, another key insight about performance reviews. It's that, they're not about judging people. They're about helping them improve. He really encourages managers to use the review as an opportunity to, provide constructive feedback, even to, top performers.
It's about fostering that
Yeah.
growth mindset,
Yeah.
right? The idea that everyone, no matter how talented they are, has areas where they can improve.
Precisely. And a well-delivered performance review can be a catalyst for that growth. I can think back to a manager I had early in my career who gave me some of the most valuable feedback I've ever received.
Yeah.
It wasn't all, positive and, sunshine and rainbows, but it was so insightful and actionable that it really helped me kind of level up my skills.
That's what it's all about. Feedback that helps you grow, not just feedback that makes you feel good or bad in the moment.
Yeah. And to further reinforce that connection between performance and growth, Grove dives into the often thorny topic of compensation.
Oh, yes. Compensation.
Yeah.
Everybody's favorite topic.
Yeah. He argues that, compensation, particularly performance-based bonuses, can be a really powerful tool for aligning individual effort with organizational goals.
So it's not just about paying people fairly. It's about actually using compensation as a lever to motivate and reward, high performance.
Right. And he emphasizes that, it's not as simple as just giving everyone, the same percentage raise every year. He highlights the complexities of designing really effective bonus systems and taking into account factors like individual versus team contributions or the time lag between effort and outcome and the importance of tying rewards to very specific and measurable results.
It's about creating that clear line of sight between what people do and what they earn.
Exactly. And while he acknowledges that, designing a truly fair and effective compensation system is one of the most challenging tasks for managers, he provides, a framework for thinking about it strategically and systematically.
It's another example of how he brings that engineering mindset to the world of management.
Right.
It's he's constantly looking for ways to optimize the system,
Yeah.
to find those levers that will drive the best possible outcomes.
He is. And he recognizes that there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
It's about understanding, your people and your company culture and your specific business context to design a system that works for everyone.
So, wow, we've explored the breakfast factory. We dived into the nuances of managing teams and organizations. We unpacked the complexities of motivation, performance reviews we've even touched on, like the strategic use of compensation.
It's a lot.
It's amazing how much ground we've covered just in this one deep dive.
It is. And what I find so remarkable about high output management is that it manages to cover, like you said, such a vast range of topics while still remaining incredibly practical and applicable.
Yeah, it's not just theory, it's a guidebook for action, which is why it continues to be such a valuable resource for managers at all levels, like even decades after it was first published.
I couldn't agree more. It's a timeless classic for a reason.
And as we kind of like wrap up our exploration of this, management masterpiece,
Yeah.
what are some of the key takeaways that have resonated with you the most?
For me, it's the emphasis on, identifying high leverage activities, the power of one-on-one meetings,
Yeah.
and the importance of, really understanding different motivational drivers. Those are principles that I try to incorporate into my work every day.
Yeah, those are great. They're such simple yet profound ideas
Yeah.
that can really transform the way you approach your work, whether you're, leading a team or just managing your own personal projects.
Exactly. And, as we've discussed, it's not about finding one right way to manage.
Right.
It's about, adapting your approach to the individual, the situation, and the specific challenges that you're facing.
It's about being like a thinking manager.
Yeah.
Right. Someone who's constantly learning and adapting and striving to get the best possible output from themselves and their team.
Well said. I think Andy Grove would be proud of that description.
I think so too. Well, before we sign off on this deep dive into high output management, I have one final thought-provoking question for you and for our listeners. So the book kind of emphasizes this idea of monitoring, not meddling.
Yeah.
How can you apply that principle to your own work, whether you're, managing others or just managing your own to-do list?
It's a fantastic question to end on. And it really gets at, I think, the heart of effective leadership. And I think one of the key takeaways from high output management is that, finding that balance between guidance and autonomy is this constant process of calibration. It's not a set it and forget it.
So it's about being present and engaged, but also knowing when to step back and let people do their thing.
Yeah.
How do we strike that balance?
Well, I think the first step is, like we've talked about, really understanding the task relevant maturity of the person that you're working with.
Yeah.
Right? If someone is new to a task or responsibility, they're going to need more, direction and support. But as they gain experience, you can gradually, loosen the reins, give them more autonomy.
It's almost like being a coach in a way.
Yeah.
Right? You start by providing, a lot of instruction and guidance. But as your players develop their skills, you can kind of step back and let them take ownership of the game.
That's a great analogy. And just like a good coach, a good manager knows when to offer, encouragement.
Yeah.
When to provide constructive criticism and when to simply get out of the way and let their team shine.
Yeah, it sounds like it requires a lot of trust, both in yourself as a manager, but also in the people that you're managing.
Absolutely. Trust is essential for, this whole high output management philosophy. And I think one of the best ways to build trust is through, clear communication.
Yeah.
Both about, expectations and about feedback.
Right. It's about setting clear goals, providing regular feedback, and creating a culture where people feel, comfortable asking questions and raising concerns if they have them.
Exactly. And it's also about recognizing that, mistakes are going to happen.
Yeah.
Nobody is perfect. And part of being, I think, a high output manager is creating a kind of a safe space for people to, learn and grow from those mistakes.
So it's not about avoiding mistakes altogether.
Right.
It's about learning from them.
Yeah.
And using them as opportunities to improve. It goes back to that growth mindset that we talked about earlier.
It does. And I think that's one of the most powerful takeaways from high output management. It's that, everyone, no matter their level of experience or expertise, has the potential to grow and improve.
And then it's our job as managers, as leaders, to kind of foster that growth.
Yeah.
To create that environment where people feel, supported and challenged to reach their full potential.
Well said. I think Andy Grove would wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment.
I think so too. Well, I think this has been a really, really insightful deep dive into high output management. We've covered so much,
Hmm.
from the breakfast factory analogy to the complexities of motivation and performance reviews. And yeah, I feel like everyone listening has, hopefully gleaned some valuable insights
Yeah.
and practical tips that they can apply to their own work and life, whether they're managing teams, running their own businesses, or just trying to be more, productive in their daily routines.
Absolutely. And remember, like, the journey to becoming, a high output manager or just a high output individual, it's an ongoing process,
Right.
It's about continuous learning and adapting and refining your approach to get the best possible results from, yourself and the people around you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into high output management. We encourage you to continue the conversation, online, share your own takeaways from the book, and of course, stay tuned for more insightful deep dives into the world of business and personal growth.
It was my pleasure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Happy managing.